Okay, so imagine this, right? You're finally opening that dream restaurant you've always talked about in
Hmm.
Budapest.
Exciting.
Yeah. Maybe it's like a cozy little place with steaming bowls of goulash or
Very nice.
yeah, or like a modern bistro but with, a Hungarian twist.
I like it.
Yeah, and the aroma of paprika everywhere
Wonderful.
and people laughing and chatting, spilling out onto those cobblestone streets.
Sounds idyllic.
Right. But hold on, there's something you got to master before you even print those menus.
Uh-oh, what's that?
The Hungarian VAT game.
Ah, yes, that's right. And it's a game with some, well, let's say unique rules.
Unique how?
Well, for starters, Hungary's VAT, or AFA as they call it there,
Right, AFA.
it's one of the highest in all of Europe. We're talking a whopping 27% for most things.
Yeah. 27%. Seriously. So every time someone orders like a plate of chicken paprikash, 27% of that goes straight to the government.
Not exactly. You see, it's not a flat 27% on everything. Hungary has this multi-tiered VAT system.
Multi-tier. Okay, so like different VATs for different things.
That's the gist of it. They have reduced rates on certain essential items.
Essentials like what? Give me the basics.
Think about the staples you'd find in any pantry. Bread, milk, your basic fruits and vegetables.
The stuff everyone needs.
Exactly. Those are all taxed at a much lower rate, just 5%.
5% for bread and milk. Now that's something I can get behind. So if I'm a restaurant owner, I want to load up my menu with those 5% items.
Well, it's not quite as simple as that. While those lower rates on essentials definitely help, you also have to consider the VAT on all your other ingredients.
Right, because what's a Hungarian restaurant without paprika, all those delicious cheeses and meat?
You're hitting all the right notes.
Mm.
And those fall into a bit of a middle ground, VAT-wise. They're typically taxed at 18%.
18%, so still higher than those essentials, but way better than that 27%.
Precisely. And that's where those strategic sourcing decisions come into play.
Because local ingredients suddenly sound even more appealing.
You got it. Sourcing locally, especially for those essential items, can do wonders for your budget.
So it's not just about being trendy or supporting local farmers, it's a savvy business move.
100%. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to VAT in your menu.
Because then comes the challenge of figuring out how to price everything. You don't want to scare customers away with those VAT-inflated prices.
It's a delicate dance, for sure. You've got to strike that balance between appealing to your diners and ensuring your business stays afloat.
Our research mentioned that restaurants have some, shall we say, creative approaches to this whole VAT and menu pricing thing.
Creative, strategic, call it what you will, but they've got to find ways to make it work. One tactic we've seen is strategically absorbing some of the VAT themselves.
Absorbing the VAT, so like they just pay it out of their own pockets.
In a way, yes, it's more common with those lower taxed items. Think of it like this: you're offering a simple soup and bread lunch special.
A classic.
Exactly. Now, absorbing a bit of the VAT on those ingredients could let you keep that lunch special super affordable, maybe even a little loss leader.
Makes sense. Draw people in with those classic dishes at a great price. But our research also mentioned something about how the prices are presented on the menu, like the psychology behind it all.
You're absolutely right. Menu psychology is huge in this game. Some restaurants, they like to be completely transparent. They bake that VA right into their listed prices.
So what you see is what you get, VA and all.
Exactly. But then others, well, they add the V8 at the end.
Ooh, that's kind of sneaky, isn't it?
It can be a bit jarring for the customer, especially if they're not expecting it. You know, you're at that cozy little bistro enjoying your meal, and bam, that extra V8 on the bill.
Definitely not a good feeling. So how do restaurants make sure they're not giving their customers that VA sticker shock?
It's all about clever menu design. Maybe you highlight those dishes using primarily lower VAT ingredients, emphasize their value, or you get creative with those prefix menus.
Prefix, so like a set menu.
Exactly. You can strategically combine those lower and higher VAT items to create a menu that's both appealing to the customer and manageable VAT-wise.
It's like they say, it's not what you serve, it's how you serve it. Or in this case, how you price it. But VAT, this is all just about the menu, right?
Oh, you wish it were that simple. VAT, it's everywhere. It's like that ingredient you can't escape, no matter what dish you're making.
Okay, so spill the beans. Where else does VAT rear its taxing head in a restaurant?
It all starts with the very heart of the kitchen, those ingredients.
Right, we talked about those different VAT rates, but what else?
Well, let's stick with the paprika example since we're talking Hungarian cuisine. Sourcing high-quality paprika locally, that might mean a lower VAT rate. But what if you're importing some fancy smoked paprika from, say, Spain?
Ah, that sounds delicious, but pricier, I'm guessing.
Potentially. And not just because of the shipping costs.
Yeah.
That imported paprika, it's likely going to come with a higher VAT, just because it's coming from outside Hungary.
So those sourcing decisions, they're about more than just finding the best ingredients.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. You've got to weigh the quality, the cost, and yes, even the VAT implications. It all ties back to savvy cost management.
Which is something every restaurant owner, no matter where they are, has to be on top of. But in Hungary, with these VAT complexities, it seems even more crucial.
You hit the nail on the head. Restaurant owners, they need to be on top of their VAT calculations. They need to be ready to negotiate with their suppliers. And sometimes they even need to see if they qualify for any of those VAT exemptions.
VAT exemptions. Now, those are two words any business owner loves to hear. What are the chances of actually snagging one of those golden tickets?
Well, it's not as simple as finding a 20 foreign coin on the street, but there are definitely situations where certain VAT exemptions might apply. Smaller businesses, for instance, ones with very limited revenue, they might catch a break.
It's like finding that secret discount code for your business.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the V8 basics in Hungary, those varying rates, how they impact menu pricing, and that whole sourcing dance with suppliers. What other V8 adventures await us in the world of Hungarian restaurants?
Oh, we've only just scratched the surface. If you think running a restaurant is a wild ride, just wait till you throw catering and special events into the mix. That's where the VAT rules get, shall we say, interesting.
Oh boy, here we go. I'm already intrigued. Tell me more.
The main takeaway is this catering, it often has its own set of VAT rules. And these rules, well, they don't always play nicely with the standard restaurant VAT.
Why is that? What makes catering so special in the eyes of the VAT man?
It boils down to the nature of the service. With catering, you're often dealing with offset locations, customized menus, all sorts of different goods and services being provided. And honestly, that just makes things a bit tricky on the VAT front.
Okay, so if I'm picturing this right, catering a big fancy wedding with a 7-course meal, that's going to be treated differently from, say, whipping up a simple buffet lunch for a company team building thing.
You're getting it. See, that standard 27% VAT rate, it usually applies to most catering services. But the specifics, they can get a little, how do I put it, murky.
Murky, you say. Sounds like we need to break out the VAT flashlights and shed some light on this for our listeners. When does this catering VAT situation get particularly complex?
Well, one common scenario is when you're dealing with, let's say, non-standard food items, or maybe you're throwing in some unique services as part of your catering package.
Give me an example.
Think about a wedding cake, a real showstopper.
Ah, the centerpiece of any good wedding reception. But even those aren't safe from the VB man's watchful eye.
Not at all. You see, with a wedding cake, you've got the ingredients, sure, but you've also got the artistry of the design, the labor involved in creating that masterpiece, and all those factors. They come into play when you're calculating that final VAT.
So it's not just about flour and sugar, it's about the craftsmanship that goes into it.
Exactly. And just wait, it gets even better. What if that cake also needs to be delivered?
Delivery, you mean like transporting it to the wedding venue? That impacts the VAT too.
Oh, absolutely. Everything in Hungary has a VAT angle.
Yeah.
The delivery, the packaging, it all gets added to the final calculation.
Wow. VAT really does find a way to insert itself into every aspect of a celebration, doesn't it?
It's the uninvited guest that always shows up, and usually with its hand out. But speaking of delivery, that's a whole other VAT adventure waiting to be explored. We've got to add that to our list of things to unpack.
We do. There's so much to cover. But before we jump into the world of food delivery apps and VAT, I want to circle back to those special event scenarios we were talking about. You mentioned that whether it's a corporate event or a private one, that can also influence the VAT.
Right. So in Hungary, the VAT system, it takes into account what the event is actually for. So picture this. You've got a big corporate gala dinner versus, say, a small intimate wedding reception. Even if the price tag for food and drinks is pretty similar, the VAT treatment might be different.
So the VAT man is essentially an expert party planner, analyzing the guest list and the purpose of the event before calculating its cut.
Essentially, yes. And we're just scratching the surface here. We haven't even touched on things like deposit rules for catering, invoicing requirements, or the particularly interesting area of cross-border catering.
Hold on. Cross-border catering. As if things weren't complicated enough already. You're telling me there's a whole other level of VAT complexity when we start talking about international events.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine the logistics, the paperwork, the VAT implications. Let's say you're catering a wedding for a couple, and they're from different countries. They've got guests flying in from all over the world. We're talking potential VAT refunds for tourists, different VAT rules for services provided across those EU borders.
My head is spinning just thinking about it.
It's a lot to wrap your head around for sure.
It is, but that's what these deep dives are all about, right? We take these topics, these seemingly complex, even intimidating topics, and we break them down, make them manageable.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to something like VAT.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of things that can pack a punch, we haven't even touched on one of the biggest VAT heavyweights in the Hungarian restaurant scene: alcoholic beverages.
Ah, yes, because what's a good Hungarian meal without a glass of Tokaji wine or a shot of Palinka, right?
Exactly. But as we all know, those drinks, they often come with a price tag that reflects more than just the cost of the grapes or the fermentation process. Am I right?
You are. All those alcoholic beverages in Hungary, from the fanciest wines to those locally brewed craft beers, they're all subject to that full 27% VAT rate.
Ouch. So that explains why that after-dinner digestive sometimes feels like a punch to the gut, both literally and figuratively. But in all seriousness, why single out alcoholic beverages? Why the hefty VAT?
Well, it boils down to a few things. One, governments love a good revenue stream and alcohol sales. They're a reliable source of income, that's for sure.
Makes sense. When people want their wine or Palinka, they're usually willing to pay for it, VAT or no VAT.
Precisely. But it's not just about the money. It's also tied to, well, the potential health and social costs associated with alcohol.
Right, excessive drinking and all that.
Exactly. So those higher taxes, they're partly a way to discourage, or at least try to discourage, excessive drinking, while also, of course, padding those government coffers.
So it's a win-win for the government, maybe not so much for the average Hungarian enjoying a night out. But how does this high VAT on alcohol actually play out for restaurant and bar owners? I mean, they're the ones caught in the middle, right?
Absolutely. It creates this real balancing act when it comes to pricing. They've got to find a way to cover their costs, including that hefty 27% VAT. But at the same time, they need to make sure their prices are still competitive, still attractive to customers.
It's a tough spot to be in. I'd imagine some places might be tempted to just eat some of that VAT themselves, keep those drinks flowing and customers happy. But that can't be a sustainable long-term strategy, can it?
You're right. It's a risky move. And that's where we see some real creativity in the restaurant and bar scene, especially in a place like Budapest. Happy hour specials, discounted prices on certain drinks, even cleverly bundling beverages with food items to try and offset that VAT impact.
So it's about finding those workarounds, those strategic loopholes to navigate this VAT maze without sacrificing profits or customers.
Exactly. It's all about finding that delicate balance. Now, we can't forget about this other massive trend that's been sweeping the restaurant industry: delivery and takeaway services.
Ah, yes, because who wants to cook these days? Especially in a city like Budapest, I'm guessing those delivery apps are going nonstop.
You have no idea. It's a whole other world.
But the question is, how does V8 fit into this whole delivery and takeaway game? Is it treated the same as dining in? Or are there nuances based on what you're ordering and how it's delivered?
Well, the good news, if you can call it that, is that generally the standard VAT tree applies to most takeaway and delivery services. But, and you probably saw this coming, the devil's in the details.
Again.
Here we go again. Those VAT details always seem to complicate things. Break it down for us. What are some things that can make VAT on delivered food a bit tricky? Well, one big thing to consider is the type of food being ordered. Some of those ready-to-eat meals, they might actually qualify for those reduced VAT rates, kind of like those essential food items we were talking about.
So ordering a pizza, for example, that might come with a different VAT charge than, say, a salad or a pastry.
That's the general idea. It's not always black and white, but that's the gist. And here's where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean unnecessarily complicated. Even the packaging gets factored in.
Hold up, are you serious? The takeout containers, the boxes, those little plastic sauce containers, those impact the VAT on my food delivery order.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome to the wonderful world of Hungarian VAT. In most cases, the VAT rate that's applied to the packaging, it has to match the VAT or the food itself. So you're delivering something that's VAT reduced. Ideally, the packaging should also be VAT reduced.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. But can you imagine being the restaurant owner trying to keep track of all those tiny details? It boggles the mind, especially with online orders coming in left and right.
It's Definitely an added layer of complexity. That's why having a really good point of sale system, like one that's specifically designed for restaurants, is so crucial.
Right, because who can do all those VAT calculations by hand? Technology to the rescue, as usual. But even with the fanciest software, understanding the nuances of VAT for delivery and takeaway, that seems pretty essential. What are some common mistakes you see businesses making in this whole delivery VAT thing?
Oh, there are a few big ones. One of the most common is miscategorizing those menu items and applying the wrong VAT rate, especially when you've got like a mix of those reduced rate items and standard rate items all in one order.
Right, because one wrong click in the system and suddenly your VAT is off.
Exactly. And then another big one, forgetting about the VAT on those packaging costs. It might not seem like much for a single takeout container, but it adds up over time.
It's like those hidden fees that sneak onto your bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got to be mindful of the food itself, those tricky categories, and those sneaky packaging costs. Anything else that tends to trip up restaurant owners, particularly those new to the whole delivery scene?
Oh, yeah. Delivery fees, those are often overlooked.
Delivery fees. Those are subject to VAT too, seriously.
Oh, yeah. They're considered a service. And most services in Hungary, as we've learned, are subject to VAT.
Of course they are.
So restaurants need to be tracking those delivery fees accurately, making sure they're included in those VAT calculations. And that's something a lot of newer businesses, they just completely miss.
It's amazing how many moving parts there are to this whole VAT thing. Even something as, quote-unquote, straightforward as ordering takeout.
It highlights just how much VAT impacts everything, from the moment those ingredients arrive at the restaurant's back door to that final delivery to a customer's doorstep. And the Hungarian system, well, it's definitely one of the more, let's say, nuanced systems out there. Understanding those nuances, those little details, it can make all the difference.
For sure. We've covered so much ground already. Those varying VAT rates, those creative menu pricing strategies, the whole sourcing saga, the intricacies of catering V8, and even a peek into the world of delivery V8, it's a lot to digest. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what about the future? Are there any hints, any whispers of potential V8 changes on the horizon? Things that restaurant owners and even diners should be keeping an eye on?
That's the million foreign question, isn't it? The world of VAT, it's rarely static, and Hungary is no exception. While the current standard rate, that 27%, it seems pretty firmly in place, for now at least. There are always whispers, rumors of potential adjustments.
Whispers, rumors, that's enough to make any business owner nervous. Spill the tea. What kind of adjustments are we talking about here? Higher rates, new exemptions, give us the inside scoop.
If only it were that simple. The truth is, these things are influenced by so many factors. The government's budget, how the economy is doing, even global events can have a ripple effect. But there's been some speculation that we might see some changes to those reduced VAT rates, the ones on those essential items.
Really? What's fueling that speculation? Is it about expanding those reduced rates, making more items eligible, or is it the opposite? Like, are they thinking of scaling back, making things even tougher for people?
Well, let's be honest, inflation, it's a global concern right now. And VAT rates, they're often adjusted to either, how do we put it, encourage or discourage spending.
Right. Use those VAT rates to steer people in the right direction, at least from the government's perspective.
Exactly. So with prices on the rise, like they are now, there might be pressure to increase VAT on certain goods and services, even those that currently have those lower rates.
So that comforting 5% on bread and milk, that might not be so secure in the long run.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. I can already see the headlines now. Goulash crisis. Rising V8 threatens Hungary's favorite comfort food.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But on a more serious note, you're saying that even those essential items, those staples that are supposed to be somewhat protected from those higher VAT rates, even those could be on the chopping block.
It's a possibility, and one that has many people concerned. But there's a flip side to all this doom and gloom. There's also been talk of potential VAT relief measures.
Relief measures! Like a VAT vacation! Sign me up!
Not quite a vacation, but I like the way you think. Seriously, though, there's been talk of providing some relief, especially for smaller businesses, those hit hardest by, well, everything that's been going on in the world lately.
That makes sense. They're often the ones struggling the most to stay afloat. So if I'm hearing you right, the future of VAT in Hungary, it's kind of a mixed bag. Potential increases on some things, potential relief on others. It's enough to make a restaurant owner's head spin. What's the best approach in all this uncertainty? Just cross your fingers and hope for the best.
That's probably not the best business strategy. The key takeaway here is to stay informed, be ready to adapt, keep a close eye on any government announcements, follow what's happening in the industry news, and honestly, it might not hurt to have a chat with a good financial advisor, one who really understands the Hungarian restaurant scene.
Solid advice. It's like the old saying goes, forewarned is forearmed. But beyond staying informed, are there any proactive steps restaurant owners can take, to try and soften the blow of potential VAT changes, or even just to navigate the existing system more effectively? Give us the insider tips.
Well, for starters, let's talk about pricing strategy.
Okay, pricing strategy, one of my favorite topics.
It's all connected to VAT. One thing you can do is regularly review your menu prices, but I'm talking about really looking at them with potential VAT fluctuations in mind. Could you build in a small buffer, even a tiny cushion, to help absorb any potential increases without giving your customers sticker shock?
So like a VAT safety net built into those prices. I like it. It's about being proactive, strategic.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of good old-fashioned communication. If those VAT changes do happen, be upfront with your customers. Explain how those changes affect your pricing and why. People appreciate transparency, especially when it comes to something as confusing as VAT.
Transparency and maybe a little empathy go a long way. It's like you're all in this together navigating the V8 waters. Now, I know we touched on this briefly earlier, but let's dive back into the world of VAT optimization for a moment. What are some of those tried and true tricks of the trade, those insider tips that successful restaurants use to, well, for lack of a better term, minimize their VAT burden?
Well, one strategy we see time and time again is a real focus on those locally sourced products. Remember those reduced VAT rates on essential ingredients?
Oh, you mean like a culinary patriotism, supporting local farmers and producers?
Exactly. By choosing local suppliers, restaurants can often tap into those lower VAT rates and reduce their overall VAT costs. It's a win-win. You're supporting the local economy and giving your VAT bill a break.
Sign me up. But it's not just about individual ingredients, right? It's about looking at the bigger picture, the menu as a whole.
You got it. Think about bundling. You can bundle services and products that fall under different VAT categories. It's all about being strategic.
Okay, I love concrete examples. Give me a for instance.
All right, so picture this. You're crafting this new prefix menu, a real celebration of Hungarian cuisine. You've got a hearty main course, maybe a rich, flavorful pork.
Sounds delicious.
Now, that pork, it's probably going to fall under that standard 27% VAT rate. But you could pair that with a dessert that qualifies for a reduced rate, maybe a traditional turgumbak, those sweet little cheese dumplings.
So you're strategically combining those higher and lower VAT items to create a more, shall we say, VAT-balanced dining experience.
Yes, got it. It's all about those little tweaks, those clever combinations.
It's like a culinary puzzle, figuring out how to make all those VAT pieces fit together. Okay, so you've got local sourcing, we've got strategic bundling. What else should savvy restaurant owners be doing to optimize their VAT situation?
Never underestimate the power of a good negotiation.
Negotiation. With whom? The VAT man.
Now, that's a negotiation I'd like to see. No, I'm talking about your suppliers. Having those open, honest conversations, especially about VAT, can make a huge difference.
So don't be afraid to haggle a bit, even if it's just about clarifying those VAT details or making sure you're getting the most favorable rates on, say, those bulk paprika orders.
Exactly. Every forint counts, right? Be assertive, be informed, and don't be shy about asking those VAT-related questions. Now, while we're on the topic of maximizing your VAT know-how, let's talk about refunds and credits. This is an area where a lot of restaurant owners, even those who've been doing this for years, might be missing out.
Refunds, like getting money back from the VAT dead, I'm all ears.
It's not quite divine intervention, but it can feel pretty good when you see that refund hit your account. So here's the basic idea. If your restaurant ends up paying more VAT on its purchases than it collects in sales, you could actually be eligible for a refund from the tax authorities.
Wait, let me get this straight. All those VAT charges you're paying, those ingredients, the equipment, even those pesky takeaway containers, you might be able to reclaim some of that money.
You're catching on. That's the power of VAT credits. And it's not just about your everyday expenses either. Let's say you cater to a lot of international tourists, maybe you host events, offer special experiences. There might be some VAT refund opportunities related to those export activities.
Wow, this is huge. It's like finding a secret stash of forints tucked away in your accounting software. But let's be real, it can't be as easy as just asking for a refund and getting a check in the mail, right?
You're right, it does take a bit more effort than that. Accurate record keeping is absolutely essential. You need detailed documentation for every single VAT-related expense if you're going to support those refund claims.
So no more stuffing receipts in a shoebox and hoping for the best come tax season. Got it.
Organization is key when it comes to VAT. And speaking of organization, this is where those software tools we were talking about earlier, they really shine. A good accounting system, especially one designed for the ins and outs of the restaurant industry, it can track all those VAT-related expenses and make the entire refund process so much smoother.
Right, because who wants to spend hours upon hours sifting through receipts and trying to decipher V8 codes? Not me! So technology is our friend, especially when it comes to staying organized and maximizing those potential refunds. But let's be honest, even with the best tools, even if my shoebox is overflowing with perfectly organized receipts, V8 can still feel overwhelming. It's like this complex, ever-changing maze. Any advice for those restaurant owners out there, those brave souls who are feeling a little, shall we say, intimidated by the beat man?
I get it, it can feel like a lot. My advice is twofold. First, never be afraid to call in the experts. VAT consultants, accountants who specialize in the restaurant industry, those are your VAT-slaying superheroes. They can help you navigate all those complexities, make sure you're maximizing those deductions, and honestly, their expertise, it's worth its weight in florins.
It's like having a financial advisor who speaks fluent VAT, specifically for restaurants. That's got to be worth something.
Oh, it absolutely is. Now, my second piece of advice is this. Don't treat VAT like an afterthought. It shouldn't be this thing you only think about once a year when tax season rolls around. Instead, try to weave VA planning into your regular business operations.
Okay, I like where this is going. But what does proactive VAT planning actually look like for a busy restaurant owner? I mean, they've got a million things on their plate already.
It's about shifting your mindset, really. It's about keeping those VAT implications in mind no matter what you're doing.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you're planning a new menu for the season.
Always an exciting time, new flavors, new dishes.
Exactly. But as you're choosing those ingredients, as you're pricing those new dishes, keep those VAT rates in mind. It's not just about how much something costs you wholesale, it's about how that VA is going to impact your profit margins.
It's like a culinary chess match, always thinking a few moves ahead, with VAT as your opponent.
Exactly. Or what about this? You're negotiating with a new supplier.
Ah, the art of the deal.
Don't be afraid to bring up VAT. Make sure you understand their terms, ask about their VAT registration, make sure everything is above board. It's all about being informed, being proactive.
Right. Knowledge is power. Now, you mentioned earlier that V8 regulations, they have this sneaky way of changing when you least expect it.
Oh, yeah. They're like that unpredictable guest who shows up unannounced and usually at the worst possible time.
So are there any areas where restaurant owners, they need to be extra vigilant, always keep their ear to the ground, so to speak?
Absolutely. One area that seems to be particularly susceptible to those surprise VAT changes is the classification of certain goods and services. What might be considered a standard rate item today, well, tomorrow they could decide it belongs in a different category.
And just like that, your carefully crafted VAT strategy goes out the window.
Pretty much. That's why it's so important to stay up to date on any potential reclassifications, especially if those changes impact ingredients or services that are common in the restaurant industry.
So it's not a one-and-done kind of thing. You can't just learn those categories once and assume you're good to go.
Nope. You've got to keep learning, keep adapting.
It's like a V8 roller coaster.
Okay. So it's not a one-and-done kind of thing. You can't just learn those categories once and assume you're good to go.
Got it. So stay informed, be ready for anything. Are there any other areas where, like, those VAT curveballs tend to pop up? Like, what else should restaurant owners be watching out for?
You know, one area that's always interesting is how VAT applies to those new trends in the restaurant industry.
Oh, right. Because the restaurant world, it's constantly evolving, right?
Yeah.
New concepts, new ways of doing things.
Exactly. And VAT regulations, they don't always keep up. So it becomes a bit of a gray area, legally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Take, for instance, ghost kitchens.
Ghost kitchens. You mean those delivery-only restaurants, the ones that operate out of, like, existing kitchens? I've seen those popping up everywhere lately.
Exactly. They're super popular, but the VA rules surrounding them,
Yeah.
well, they're still a bit murky in a lot of places, including Hungary.
So if I'm a restaurant owner and I'm thinking about jumping on that ghost kitchen bandwagon, I need to do my VA homework first.
Big time. Otherwise, you might find yourself on the wrong side of a VT audit, and trust me, nobody wants that.
Definitely not. It's like that old saying, ignorance is bliss, but not when it comes to V8.
Exactly. Ignorance and V8, they do not mix well.
Now, another interesting development, and this is something that's becoming increasingly important in the restaurant industry as a whole, is the intersection of VAT and sustainability. Okay, now this is interesting. Because, like, saving the planet and understanding VAT, those two things go hand in hand.
Well, they might. More and more, we're seeing countries starting to implement VAT reductions, even incentives, for businesses that are actively promoting sustainable practices.
Oh, interesting. Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about things like using eco-friendly packaging, sourcing ingredients locally, reducing waste, those kinds of things.
So if I'm a restaurant owner and I'm, let's say, switching to those biodegradable takeaway containers or sourcing all my produce from local farmers markets, that could actually lead to some VAT perks.
Potentially, yes. It's still early days, and those specific incentives vary from country to country, but it's definitely a trend worth watching, especially as, the focus on sustainability, it's only going to intensify in the coming years.
Right, because at this point, who doesn't want to save the planet? And if it comes with some VAT benefits, even better. It's a win-win for everyone. But it just goes to show VAT, it really does touch every aspect of the restaurant industry, doesn't it?
It really does. It's
Oh,
not
no.
just about the food. It's about the entire ecosystem. It's about where you source your ingredients, the packaging you use, the delivery services you offer, even how you choose to operate your business in an increasingly digital world.
And how you choose to promote sustainability within your business. It's amazing how V8 manages to weave its way into everything.
It's a reminder that VAT is more than just a line item on a balance sheet. It's this complex, dynamic system that's intertwined with every single aspect of a restaurant's operations, whether we like it or not.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today. I mean, we've gone from those nitty-gritty details of VAT rates to those creative strategies restaurants are using to even this glimpse into the future of VAT with sustainability and those ever-changing trends.
It's been quite the deep dive, that's for sure.
It has. But before we let our listeners go, let's do a quick recap, a little LDR, if you will, of those key takeaways from our exploration of this wild world of Hungarian restaurant VAT. So for those of you just joining us, or for those who need a little refresher, what are the top 3 things to remember about navigating this VAT maze?
All right, so takeaway number 1, and this is a big one, those varying V8 rates. We've said it before, and we'll say it again, 27%, that's the standard rate in Hungary, but don't forget about those reduced rates, that 5% on essential items, that 18% on certain other foods.
It's all about knowing your VAT ABCs, or should I say AFAs.
Exactly. Knowing those ins and outs, understanding which VAT rate applies to what, that's absolutely essential for managing your costs effectively, for pricing your menu strategically.
It's like a culinary game of Tetris, figuring out how to make all those VAT pieces fit together. Okay, what's takeaway number 2? What else should our listeners etch into their VAT memory banks?
Don't underestimate those hidden costs. VAT, it's sneaky like that. It pops up in places you might not even expect.
Right. It's not just about the final price on the menu, it's about those behind-the-scenes costs as well.
Exactly. So think about your ingredients, where you're sourcing them from, the agreements you have with your suppliers. Think about those takeaway containers for your delivery service, those tiny little costs that can add up if you're not paying attention.
It's all connected. VAT is like that ingredient that finds its way into every dish, whether you want it there or not. And finally, takeaway number 3, drum roll, please.
VAT is not static. It's constantly evolving, always changing. Government policies shift, economic conditions fluctuate, new trends emerge, and VAT, it adapts.
It's like that friend who always has to have the latest gadget, the newest thing. VAT is never content to just sit still, is it?
Not at all. So the key takeaway here, stay informed. Keep your finger on the pulse of those VAT changes. Be prepared to adapt your business strategies as needed. And hey, it never hurts to have a good VAT consultant on speed dial, just in case.
Solid advice, because sometimes you just need that expert guidance to navigate those VAT twists and turns.
Exactly. So to sum up our VAT survival guide, know your rates, watch out for those hidden costs, and stay informed, because VAT never sleeps.
It's like a VAT jungle out there. But seriously, we've talked a lot about how VAT affects the bottom line for restaurant owners. But at the end of the day, it's the customer who feels that impact too, right?
100%. And this is something a lot of people forget about. Those VAT increases, especially on those essential items, those everyday things that everyone needs, They affect affordability for everyone. It can even lead to some pretty significant shifts in consumer behavior.
Right. Suddenly, that daily bowl of goulash, that comforting, affordable staple, maybe it becomes a once-a-week treat if those V8 rates keep climbing.
Exactly. It's basic economics, really. As prices go up, demand goes down, and people start making different choices.
And that brings up a whole other set of questions about the future of V8, not just here in Hungary, but globally.
Right, because VAT is everywhere in some form or another.
Exactly. So how will these systems adapt? How will they change as we face new challenges like, everything that's been going on, inflation, economic inequality, climate change?
It's the million-foreign question.
I mean, will we start to see a movement towards a more progressive VAT model? Like lower rates on those essential goods and services, the things everyone needs, higher rates on luxury items, the things, let's be honest, that people don't really need.
Interesting. It's like a V8 Robin Hood situation, taking from the extravagant and giving to the essential.
Exactly. Or, maybe governments will start using VAT as a tool to incentivize certain behaviors, like encouraging people to make more sustainable choices.
Right, like those VAT breaks for restaurants that are using eco-friendly packaging or sourcing their ingredients locally.
Exactly. It's like killing two birds with one V8 stone. It's definitely something to keep an eye on, these potential shifts in how VA is used, how it's perceived.
Absolutely. The world of V8, it's rarely boring, that's for sure. There's always something new to learn, some new challenge to navigate.
Well said. On that note, we'll leave you with plenty to ponder, plenty to digest, if you will, after our VA feast today.
I'm full.
A huge thank you to our expert for expertly breaking down this complex world of Hungarian restaurant VA. You've given our listeners a lot to think about.
My pleasure. Always happy to delve into the fascinating world of V8.
And for our listeners who are eager to delve even deeper, maybe do a little V8 research of their own, don't forget to check out the incredibly informative resources over at menuveal.com.
They've got it all covered over there.
They do. They've got articles on VAT rates, those ever-changing VAT regulations, even practical tips for anyone who's dreaming of opening a restaurant or already navigating the exciting world of Hungary's culinary scene.
It's the go-to resource for everything restaurant VAT.
Absolutely. So until next time, happy eating, everyone, and may your VAT calculations always be in your favor.